Ça, c'est le septembre.
J'ai juste un annonce à faire pour moi. Je peux la faire? Je sais pas. Oui, peut-être. Juste un petit annonce. Cette semaine, il y a élection de délégués. Il faudra le faire parce qu'on est 6 à se présenter. Pour le faire, donc il y a 6 candidatures qui sont proposées, les 4 délégués qui ont le fait l'année passée, Michael, David, Ruth, Nadia et moi-même. Et aussi il y a Arion et Melissa Risset qui sont présentés. Pour le faire, vous avez une ongle sur IS Academia, avant-dernier où c'est fait élection de délégués. Merci.
Alors, je pense qu'on peut commencer. Si. Et, so, the idea is to speak. This is for us. No, it's just me. So I'm the test conference, the conference we do to be sure that next time when the conferences will really start, everything will work. So we have some problems, some technical problems, but finally we will get there. So, in fact, I'm happy to be here today and to start finally this series of conferences dedicated to a person that has just left. In fact, the conversation had to be the one to start. The theme that we propose to the studio is a research theme. And this is why my conference is not really a conference. It's in fact a moment of exchange with you, with a laboratory of urbanism, on a subject, on a topic that we think is important for the reflection on the city. Is a reflection on a project, on a radical project for the contemporary city and for the future of the city. As we have said in many times, the form of the city, the form of the contemporary city, has changed. And also in Switzerland, also in this image of the Swiss plateau, this form of city is recognizable. André Corbeau, at the beginning of the 90s, was describing this form of urbanity with the terms of city, territory, ville territoire. It was a continuity, an urban continuity, from Senegal to Geneva, as Corbeau was describing. Today, we think that this type of city is a true capital, is a true spatial capital, and an agent of transformation. And this is the way in which the research proposed to look at this form of city as a resource, as a support, and as a place of potentiality. The horizontal metropolis is a layered territorial construction where agriculture and non-agricultural economic activities create an original mix. We think that the horizontal metropolis goes beyond the theme of the very urban, even the theme of suburbs. This will be discussed, for example, Alan Berger will come here in a couple of weeks and we will discuss about the future of suburbia and the differences with the horizontal metropolis conditions. And it refers to closely interlinked, co-penetrating rural-urban realities, communication, transportation, and economic systems. This is very important because it's a specific type of space that we consider the horizontal metropolis. In the sense that we can describe the spatial characteristics, the spatial qualities, in terms that are different from those that we were used to get for the traditional urban space. The città diffusa of northern Italy, or the città territorio, as in Italian definition, define grain settlement dispersion in Flanders, Belgium, or the Zwischenstadt in Germany, describing urban condition, but also the Desakota systems in China, in Japan, in Thailand, or in Vietnam. So the horizontal metropolis is a natural capital and a spatial capital. This specific spatial condition has been the test case for the elaboration of original urban theories, and is facing today new challenges, paradoxes, and crises. But it may also be today the support of an innovative urban territorial project. Horizontality of infrastructure, urbanity and relationships, mixed use, diffuse accessibility, generate a specific habitable space. The research investigates the horizontal metropolis, the research that we perform to Superstudio. Investigate the horizontal metropolis, its space, its tradition, formation, and authors. Its relevance today as an energetic, ecological, and social design issue. We propose three main frames to deal with the horizontal metropolis. The first frame is space, and space, of course, has measures. The metropolis of the past, as Paris, that you see in this picture, is not a different form of metropolis, a concentrated city. We can read inside the European megalopolis other types of urbanity. The European megalopolis inspired Jean Gottman in his recognition of megalopolis in the eastern coast of the United States. Other types of urbanity emerged, which can be analyzed and compared, starting from their measures and modules, which are often an expression of deeply embedded rationalities. We see in this comparison different types of metropolis, the Brussels one in the middle, the Dutch configuration, and Paris. And the rationality that is deeply embedded in these territories is also something we can measure. Is something giving rules, guidelines, organization, and structure to the horizontal metropolis. The second frame we propose is concern a tradition of reflection on different forms of the urbanity. The project for a horizontal metropolis has come to the fore at different times throughout the history of the city and of territorial design. Of course, we all consider the reference of the city, but this is not the only reference. Here you see some of the authors. We have divided for the moment into groups. We can say anticipations, maybe even prophecies. These are the authors we can read here, from Slow to Gertis and others. And a longer list of more recent authors. Many of them will be here at the Befehl in the next weeks. McGee, Indovina, Andrea Ranzi, Thomas Sievert, etc. And we think very simply to collect the text produced by these authors, which finally describe very clearly this tradition. And it is a tradition that has never been reconstructed or constructed. And we will discuss this tradition in a series of seminars, conferences, and interviews. A lot of books, texts that collect images, some maps, and interpretations, conceptualization of the new urban condition, both in Europe, in the United States, and in Asia. The third frame proposed is related to the future of this city, of this type of city, the energetic, ecological, and social design issue of the metropolis, in which design is the research tool. In the last decades, the city territory has started to become a recognized and explicit object of policies and design. In the academic research, but also in some contexts where the awareness of this spatial, economic, and social configuration is more mature. Here you see a couple of images of a plan that together with Marco Secchi we did more than 10 years ago in Italy, in the south of Italy, the Salento region, in which we were dealing with this condition of dispersion, and we measured the possibility of considering those conditions as the basis for a possible project. Or also a research, this is more academic, but finally dealing with very concrete context. That is the research, the project of isotropy that always together with Marco Secchi we developed for the metropolitan region of Venice. So the idea is to, again, to collect all the efforts that have been made in the last decades to reflect with the tool of design on this type of territory, and to understand which are crucial and the resistance to design, to a project, to an idea of this type of territory. The thing we propose to the students is to investigate through the elaboration of concepts, scenarios, and prototypes. I insist that with the need we have today of prototypes. We have explored scenarios in the past. Now we need to go beyond the type and to innovate, imagine new type, so prototype. The title of the research, as you can very easily understand, is an oxymoron. Two contrasting terms are joined: metropolis and horizontal. The metropolis is traditionally associated with big, core, chief cities that exercise their power on the region around. The theme of the infinite expansion of the metropolis and of the new urban dimension has been widely investigated. These two conditions, so the infinite expansion and the new dimension of the city, characterize the Großstadt, the metropolis, debate at the turn of the 20th century in Germany. And also in Austria, it is very important the reference to the project made by Otto Wagner for the Great Pink competition, and his text, Die Großstadt. The metropolis Großstadt is defined as a place of concentration, related to industrial production, commerce, and colonization. Its problems residing in the contradiction of such concentration, and in particular the hygienic and housing question. Since the second half of the 19th century, a quantitative and qualitative reflection on the lack of green spaces takes form in several texts. For example, the famous text of Arminius about the importance of green belt. The metropolis is the place of power, where the money economy develops, is associated to a way of life, to the intensification of perception and intellectualism, to the blasé attitude, to the need of precisions and integration inside a complex urban object. All topics deeply investigated by Zimmel and later by the Chicago School, or also at Park in the 20s. The metropolis, and this is a quotation from Zimmel, grants to the individual a kind and an amount of personal freedom which has no analogy whatsoever under other conditions. Zimmel at the beginning of the 20th century. The particularity and incompatibility of any human being is expressed in a distinct way of life, in the individual independence and elaboration of individuality itself. It is here that the metropolis, again I'm quoting Zimmel, assumes an entirely new rank order in the world history of the spirit. The metropolis is a place of concentration and complexity, is the new social arena. The second term, horizontal, is opposed to vertical and can be used when coupled with city or horizontal development, horizontal urbanism, with the meaning of low-rise, low-density, extended development or city, often associated with suburban condition. This is the way in which Albert used the term horizontal development, horizontal urbanism. In geography, the term horizontality has to do with the roles of different parts of the territory, or the roles that the different parts of the territory play, their dependency or complementarity, and in general, with the distribution of power in space and in society. Horizontal relations are opposed to vertical relations. For example, the traditional vertical center-periphery relations can be swallowed up by emerging horizontal relations inside the former territory or inside the former servant territory. So in the horizontal metropolis research, the term horizontality couples the two meanings. The horizontality of perception, the city territory is one of the new form of the contemporary city, and the horizontality of power relations, often part of a longer history of shared territorial responsibilities. Horizontality in Europe is a part of the long political structure of Europe itself and the national state. One of the roots of the horizontal metropolis is a large, almost mythical umbrella defined by the middle part of the Carolingian Empire. The part that never developed one big nation state, as the eastern part, France, with Paris, with capital, or the western part, Germany, much later. This impressive north-south section of Europe, from the Netherlands to Provence in the south of France and northern Italy, was composed of multiple political entities, of medium-sized cities, and dense infrastructural networks. No big capitals, no big states. Rooted in the dissolution of the Frankish Empire in the 1880, the Roman Burgundy space covers the areas that were later, much later, interpreted as diffuse urban conditions. As part of Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and I have to say this part of Switzerland, northern Italy. In these areas, cities were not just places of consumption and surplus extraction, but centers of trade and industry. In the High Middle Ages, I'm quoting two Dutch authors, in the High Middle Ages, urban-rural relations were much more differentiated and therefore more evenly balanced, often with farmers owning their land and supplying international markets as independent entrepreneurs. There was also much capital, and this is very important, much capital invested in rural projects. Land renovation, infrastructure, improvement, mining, industrialization. Today, this is not this condition is not anymore a unique European condition, as we will see, but it is important to refer to the long-term territorial and therefore political construction. At least we can say that one of the roots is in this very long process of territorial construction. The clash among the two terms, horizontal and metropolis, originated the oxymoron and the research hypothesis. The horizontal metropolis, a radical project, originally tested in the construction of a long-term vision for Brussels. Together with Bernardo Secchi, we worked a few years ago on the construction of a vision for the Brussels region, and we decided to synthesize our understanding of this region in the terms of horizontal metropolis. And by this meaning, of trying to highlight the space in which metropolitan characters coexist with horizontality of relations and of space. Referring, as I said before, to an extended urban condition, a city territory, in which we can recognize the existence of long-term diffuse infrastructural support. Very briefly, the idea is that there is a territory that is completely covered by a dense network of infrastructures. They can be mobility infrastructures, they can be social infrastructures, they can be economic infrastructures, which give the entire territory a large inhabitability. And in which we can recognize some territorial figures that are, for example, the valleys, structured together with a very diffuse and extended network of public transport, this territory. And this is something related to a long-term territorial accumulation. The point is that today, this support can be reinterpreted and can be the basis for a new project. We are not want to reflect on the Brussels or the Flanders region in terms of horizontality. These are other exercises or other design explorations made in the frame of the structural plan for Flanders that were exhibited in one of the last Biennale, in which you enter these morphologies and you start to reflect on the components of this horizontal metropolis, which is always a hybrid condition in which you can reinvent the condition of coexistence of different activities or different things. Something also very important is the presence of production, industrial production, diffused. So it's not only related to the long past of territorial occupation, but also more recent decision about individual entrepreneurship in these regions. So beyond the construction of an interpretative concept, the horizontal metropolis research explores the possibility of a project for the city territory that strengthens the horizontal relation in a space where polarization and hierarchization processes are weakening horizontal networks, disconnecting, marginalizing territories and populations. The research investigates forms of order and coexistence different from the hierarchical one. So it's not a small problem. But as I said before, we are not the first to reflect on this. And this is why I think fundamental to investigate the horizontal metropolis through its space, its tradition, and authors. Because here there is an incredible legacy that is really important to read from the beginning to the end, use this extreme terms, to understand what has been already proposed and discussed. In 2008, the shift rural-urban population is announced by a UN projection, as announced for the present, and the projection for 2050 push this tendency even further. In this context, the debate on the future of cities is crowded with interpretations, metaphors, provisional definitions that try to cope with the new characters, forms, dimensions, lifestyles, or reality. In the foreword of a book, The Stubborn Reader, is a big book collecting the important text of the American side, mainly, Kenneth T. Jackson, who is the author of a very influential book, Travelers Frontier, the Suburbanization of the United States, of 1985, still associates the idea of a European city to a dense urban environment, even in small towns, and to sharp divisions between rural and urban areas. The persistence of this caricature is part of the reason why I think the horizontal metropolis research is still necessary. The first attempt to reflect on the territories of the dispersion of the European scale was made with the research transformation of the urban habitat in 1992, coordinated by the University of Venice and by the The emphasis was in that moment on the description, the need to describe the space of the diffuse city at a European scale. It was also on the materials, on the urban materials constructing such space, with a particular attention to those materials related to the recent decentralized, diffuse, small, medium industrial production. And that was very clear. There was a very strong connection between the reading of the physical space and the reflection of a certain type of economy of small, medium enterprises. An economy that today has not disappeared, but for sure is getting into a very important transition. This type of decentralized, dispersed production that is today already going through new interpretation, new life cycles. So this type of hybrid condition, which we have the legacy of the rural landscape and then the new, more recent industrial landscape, and already today probably the need to rethink their presence. The emphasis on the description in that moment was really a description of the physical characters of space through fieldwork. This is a more recent one that we have repeated just last year, just to go back again on this type of situation and read again exactly the physical characters of this space. In their articulation, in their fragmentation, in the co-presence of different activities. And also, by going inside, you can really exchange with people and understanding how deeply things have changed since not so many years. The second important moment was an exhibition that we always in Venice we organized, and that we also discussed here in the film. New territories. Again, the attempt was to describe, and here the accent was mainly on the scenario, so on the future. So how we can look at these territories with an open perspective, how we can imagine their deep transformation. We started to use a frame, 50 kilometers by 50 kilometers, and recognizing situations at the European scale. The scenarios were mainly related to this morphology and to the possibility that the future would have increased this dispersion, so a sort of gasification of Europe, even forgetting the norms and really imagining this complete carpet. At the same time, we were recognizing other type of projects that were in fact reinforcing the norms, polarizing, for example, in relation to the initial network of the high-speed train that practically transformed Europe in one city. But this city is, of course, very, very selective, as we know. So the high-speed train and its network has created a different Europe, more selective in a way, with also the weakening of other types of relations among different parts of the territory. For example, abandoned railways, abandoned lines, because of investment that were needed to construct this type of Europe. But the truth is, in fact, that the two phenomena continue both. And now the point is that we have to decide all that. We have to rethink. Europe is completely different than 15 years ago. And also, what is fundamental today, and this is one of the reasons to again try to construct comparisons and to reflect at a bigger scale, is that we understand much better today that the tradition is larger. It's not just a European tradition of reflection, but is much larger. There are other authors, and then it is important now probably to connect all these contributions. I would like to stay just a moment on one of these contributions. In fact, it's not an Asian scholar, it's still a Western scholar, but still David McGee, that will be here in some weeks. He described the process of transformation of the areas in between cities, a little bit like Thomas Zieber when describing this vision stuff, in terms of Desakota. So the Desakota, as you can see from this image, is the space of intermingled characteristics in between cities, in between core cities, in which industrial production was present, agriculture was present, infrastructure, also micro infrastructure, not just the big infrastructures. So finally, a description that is very close to several descriptions that were given in the same period, beginning of the 90s, for Switzerland, for the northern Italy, and for Belgium, for Flanders, etc. So, by showing like this that there is something in common. We don't know exactly what is in common, but for sure the descriptions, the interpretation of the authors, use terms that are very, very close, very, very similar. So the point is, and this is really a question of circulation of ideas, of transcultural debate. What is the meaning of these similarities? Why to discuss, to describe the attitudes of Asia, the wet attitudes of Asia, can have something to do with the description, for example, of the big declarations realized by the Romans in Europe and particularly in Italy. What there is in common? Martina Barcellona just concluded the thesis has started to reflect on this, and I hope that with the presence of Ted McGee, we will have a very important occasion to exchange comments. And Ted McGee described, you see, different parts of Asia using three categories of desarrollo related to densities, to possibility of evolution, to proximity to big centers, and to different context. So the traditions we have of study and reflection on this type of environment, I think, are incredible heritage for us. Following, and we will try to make this geography of text site territories that are mentioned by these authors that refer always to concrete territories. And understanding this sort of geography and atlas of ideas and of maps. Following the long tradition of tentative interpretation of the urban phenomena, we can recognize several research paths related to specific situations. These are just some. I have to repeat each moment that this is the beginning of the research, is not so it's just first ideas. First of all, the Industrial Revolution and the continuum city countryside as a policy. In this case, the result of Metropolis is the conscious investment in the construction of an alternative to the concentrated city as a solution to its problems of congestion, of social and political conflictuality. Belgium is one of the most exemplary cases. The idea of a model of banlieue radius and the radiant periphery that says the campus here, discussed and proposed in the middle of the 80s, and opposed to the Corbusier radiant city, is supported by an important book in English author, Simon Rowntree, 1910. It's a report on labor and land in Belgium. The scope of Simon Rowntree, he was a sociologist, an English sociologist, also author of Poverty, a study of town life, was to contribute to the solution of poverty in Britain by studying the system of land tenure in general in Europe. In his book, the author connects the possibility of working in the city and living in the countryside to the existence of a dense network of railways, light railways and tramways. Here we recognize the specific shape that the Industrial Revolution took in Belgium, not only to disperse the working class outside the city, which will be process of suburbanization that we know traditional, but to connect the peasants, supposedly more docile and at a lower cost, to the new industrial economy without incubating them. So, without the rural exodus. In simple words, the transport facilities in Belgium are probably better than those of any other country in the world. The construction of infrastructure at the regional scale is, in Marcel's words, the logical answer to a specific problem. Today, the dense network, you see one image from Segregated after scroll, the one before was from Michele Ubicato, so from Seminar, and Bruno de Loed studied the Atlas on flowers. So, today the dense network of public transport remains a fundamental layer of territorial organization. Nevertheless, it is important to clarify that agricultural organization, Belgium is a country of small holdings, is always single products speaking, constituted the underlying dispersed structure of small villages and cottages, on top of which, by a process of stratification, the new and original industrial structure was laid. The soil of Flanders, although not highly fertile, but frequently manure, was the most intensive agriculture of Europe, with the exception of the market gardens in Paris. Manure of all kinds is carefully preserved and used on the land. Nothing is wasted. This is always the symbol. The average size of the buildings in Belgium is smaller than in any other country of the holdings in Belgium is smaller than in any other country. The poor soil able to maintain dense population and proving the capacity of small holdings to organize crop rotation. The long-term dispersed character is then there since centuries. Second possible path concerns the idea of the urbanized countryside and the search of a new spatial hybrid. The terms campagne urbanisée, later used in Italian campagna urbanizzata by Giuseppe Samonà in the 1960s to conceive a project of dispersed urbanization for the Trentino region, was used by Emile van der Velde, the socialist exponent and professor in Brussels, in connection with the new, at the time, system of transportation. Van der Velde criticized the negative separation of rural activities from industry, a situation that could be overcome by wider accessibility. The invention of the new hybrid spaces, this is a model, would have been possible. Farms, factories, and townhouses would have redesigned the old villages as a regular composite, while villas could infiltrate the urban space, bringing air and green. This hybridization would have spread in the countryside the material of civilization, still peculiar of the city. There is no opposition against the city or the big city. The idea is that the urban civilization, notwithstanding its problems, is good. So good that a redistribution of some of its characters to larger territories could only be beneficial. The working people, the working class trains with incredibly low cost ticket are, in Van der Velde's opinion, the decision the most unconsciously revolutionary, taken by the Belgian government in the last 30 years since this book that was published at the beginning of the 20th century. A book titled L'exode rural et le retour au champ. So the rural exodus and the coming back to the fields. So the question, here you see some images from the project we did for the Salento region, in which we reflect very much on this hybridity of conditions between agriculture and small production, and this incredibly dense network supporting this hybridity. So the question of the new integration. This is the question we have discussed exactly today in West Lausanne, in which the point was underlined. We know what does it mean to speak of a percentage of activity and housing. When we go to the physical material, to the space, no one knows what does it mean. We don't know anymore because we are inside the tradition of separation, zoning. So the point is to reconstruct maybe this possibility of coexistence of new integration. So against the division of labor, the agrarian crisis of the end of the 19th century, with the competition of the goods produced by the rest of the world, depletes the European countryside and reinforces the attractiveness of the city. The stronger and stronger concentration in the metropolis pushes several authors at the turn of the century, concluded, to revive the idea of power redistribution and territorial rebalance already proposed by authors like Ruskin, Morris, Proudhon, and others. The industrialization of agriculture and the implantation of new industries in the fields is the manifesto of Kropotkin. Against the division of labor and Taylorism. Having no idea, this is Kropotkin, how and why the machinery performs its rhythmical movements. Kropotkin is in favor of recovering the most varied texture of soils and climates of any nation, a variety which can only exist within a variety of occupation. So there is a very interesting connection between the idea of mix and variety of occupation and the possibility to appreciate the variety of soils, the variety of climates. The theme of integration against the division is crucial in a period in which, as Colin Ward, editor of the 12th edition, later edition of the book, underlines, in that moment Britain was the workshop of the world. At the beginning of the 20th century, the decentralization of industrial production seems possible, thanks also to electricity and hydropower, the white coal, as Emma de Velde was writing, I will quote in French, à faveur de charbon, la machine à vapeur avait écarté les fabriques des cours d'eau. L'électricité réside en métal. It is the presence of dispersed energy production in the mountains that feeds Rousseau imagining, while describing already at the end of the 18th century Switzerland as a unique city, with the workshops distributed in the valleys close to the cliffs and the risks. I'm going to conclude now. Here you see in this image the factories in the field, in terms of working, of the diffuse city in the Veneto region. You see the dispersed small and medium-sized industry that stand today beside and beyond the proto-industry close to water, and the big industry of Porto Bandiera, for which big dams and transmissions network were created. This is very important, that the abundance of energy in the territory, the network of distribution of this energy, and this is a mosaic made by an artist in one of the important idea, describing the territorial distribution and also production of energy, mainly electricity from hydropower, feeding all the territory and then feeding also a dispersed industrial production. The third path I would suggest is that you see that these different trajectories are very close in a way. One is connecting to the other. Is the true revolution in the land use. This is Jean Botman discussing and proposing one of the main views of his interpretation is that Megalopolis is a place where a revolution in the land use has happened. So the idea of revolution in the land use is fundamental in Metropolis. I repeat that the eastern coast, the eastern side of the United States. The book was published in 1961, but it was the result of 20 years of research on the American city, the North American city. And this is a repeated and specific character inside the territories of dispersion. In the Zapata system described by McGee, or in the Città diffusa described by Francesco Udovina, by Bernardo Secchi, and others. This character is what, even at first glance, makes the city territory so different from the traditional idea of a suburb. And although these two forms have today more and more similarities, the suburb and the horizontal metropolis, they refer to different ideological and utopian even background. And finally, to conclude, I would say that the fourth trajectory, it's just to conclude provisionally, is the role of open space, the space in between, things. That is, in fact, an impractical resource for the new project of the horizontal metropolis. This highly productive agriculture. Here you see again one of the map in Xavier book that were investigated in the 90s, the 80s, but also before, but particularly by the students of Andrea Granzi that was reflecting on Agronica, just to clarify that this open space is in fact a space of innovation, a space of new coexistence, where you can imagine original landscapes, and we will discuss this with Andrea Granzi that we come to the picture. For sure, an incredible resource of the horizontal metropolis. Well, I think that this is enough for today. So we will have moments and time to continue to speak about mapping, but what to map, what is important to understand of this urban configuration, and also we will have time to discuss design strategies for this configuration. For the moment, I think it's important to understand that there is a tradition, there are authors, there is a past in which a slow construction, a slow territorial construction, has finally accumulated such capital, such spatial capital, that we call the horizontal metropolis. Thank you. If there are questions, yeah. And it is too late. We understand. We can discuss tomorrow, because I think we have had a very tough day, from the field work to the seminars in Western San now is so maybe it's better to say tomorrow.